Hi friends, in this video we are going to discuss the questions that were asked for December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles from the topic types of informal fallacy. So this area comes under logical reasoning, as you all know, and under this particular module we have a very important topic, that is fallacies. And this fallacy can be divided into two different categories. We have formal fallacies as well as informal fallacies. So a formal fallacy is an error that happens in the form or structure of an argument, and informal fallacy is basically an error or fallacy that happens in the content of an argument. So this is a basic distinction that you have to understand between formal fallacies and informal fallacies. And under these two types of fallacies, under formal fallacies as well as informal fallacies, we have various types of fallacies to study. And types of informal fallacy particularly is a very important topic from which we are getting a lot of questions in net exam. So in this particular video we will be just focusing on a very few sample questions from the December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles, so that this video is particularly intended to understand this some of the important types of informal fallacies and how you have to learn about it, how you can associate different examples that are associated with different types of informal fallacies as well. So here you have the first question. Whoever thrusts a knife into another person should be arrested. Surgeons thrust a knife into another person when operating. Therefore, surgeons should be arrested. Which fallacy is committed in the following argument? And you have the options: hasty generalization, fallacy of accident, red herring, and appeal to unqualified authority. So consider this particular example that is given here. Whoever thrusts a knife into another person should be arrested. That is a general rule. Whoever kills another person using a knife should be arrested. That is a general case. Surgeons thrust a knife into another person when operating. So we are applying that particular general rule to a very specific scenario, that is in a medical context. We say that surgeons also uses, or they also thrust knife into another person when they are operating, and we are saying that therefore surgeons should be arrested. So what is the problem here? We are stating a general rule and we are not focusing, or we are not considering that there are certain exceptions that can be possible for this particular general rule. So this kind of fallacy can be called as fallacy of accident. So what do you mean by fallacy of accident? It is committed by an argument that applies a general rule to a particular case in which some special circumstance makes the rule inapplicable. So we are actually applying a general rule to a particular case that might be an exceptional case in this particular context. We are saying that, or we are applying this particular general rule a specific or a particular case in which some special circumstances makes the rule inapplicable. So I'll just give you an example so that this idea will be more clearer for you. Assuming that birds can fly applies to all birds and therefore arguing that a penguin can fly. So what is the problem here? We have a general rule that birds can fly, or in other words, when we consider birds or when we hear the term birds, one of the most important peculiarities or characteristics that comes to our mind is that it can fly. Bird is something that can fly, right? So we are saying that, okay, birds can fly, penguin is a bird. So we are saying that penguin can also fly, but the problem here is penguin is a bird, there is nothing wrong in that, but penguin cannot fly, right? That is an exception in the category of birds. We know that, we are familiar to that, birds can fly, but penguin is a bird, but penguin is actually an exception in the category of birds because that cannot fly. So if we are saying that we are assuming that birds can fly, that is general rule, then penguin is a bird, so obviously penguin can also fly. If we are committing or we are stating this kind of a statement, or if we are stating this kind of an argument, what happens here? Here you are committing a fallacy, that is fallacy of accident. As I have already mentioned, what is a fallacy here? It is committed by an argument that applies a general rule to a particular case in which some special circumstance makes the rule inapplicable. So coming back to our question, whoever thrusts a knife into another person should be arrested. It's a general rule, we are applying it to a specific case. Surgeons thrust a knife into another person when operating, but we are not considering that in this particular case, this rule that we have mentioned is not applicable. We are not considering that, and we are coming to a conclusion, that is, therefore surgeons should be arrested. So this particular argument is having a fallacy, and we call that particular fallacy as fallacy of accident. So in this question, that is option B. So the right answer for this question is option B. Alright, moving to the next question. Identify the fallacy committed in the argument. The policies suggested by him have no merit since he was once charged with embezzlement. Embezzlement means if we have committed any kind of financial if you have done something wrong in the field of finance, so that is embezzlement. So what happened here? Identify the fallacy committed in the argument. The policy suggested by him have no merit since he was once charged with embezzlement. So actually, in this particular case, what happens here? We are putting forward an argument. We are saying that we don't have to listen to him because he has done something wrong in the past. So we are actually focusing, or we are actually focusing on his character, right? We are attacking that particular person's character, and we are stating that he is not a person of good conduct, so we don't have to listen to him. So this kind of a fallacy which is committed in an argument can be called as argumentum ad hominem. So basically in this particular fallacy, what happens? This fallacy occurs when instead of addressing someone's argument or position, you irrelevantly attack the person or some aspect of the person who is making the argument. So this aspect can be a personal characteristic, or it can be his background, or it can be his or her physical appearance, anything of that sort. So if you consider the previous example that we have mentioned, if that person's policies or the ideas that he has put forth, if you have any disagreement with that, you can state the reasons for that. So this policy, he has given this kind of an idea, and there are some problems with that. That's how you have to put forth, or you have to say something if you want, or that's how you can actually defend your stand, right? If that policy is having some issues, or if the idea that he has put forth having some issues, you can state that there is nothing wrong in that. But instead of that, if that person is actually attacking the character of the person and saying that no, we don't have to listen to the ideas that he has given or he has put forth. So this kind of an attack on some aspect of the person or the character of the person can be called as argumentum ad hominem, or against the man. This fallacy occurs when instead of addressing someone's argument or position, you irrelevantly attack the person or some aspect of the person who is making the argument. Alright, so I'll just give you an example here. Don't listen to X's opinions on net exam. She or he is not a person of good conduct. So let's say if someone is telling you something about net exam, they are giving their opinions on that. If there is something wrong, if there is some error in the opinions that particular person given to you, you can say that is not right. That is not given or it is not an official thing, it is something wrong, there is an error in the thing that you have mentioned, you can say that. There is nothing wrong in that. But instead of that, if you are saying that we don't have to care about that, we don't have to listen to that person's opinions on net exam because he is not a person who is having a good character. So we are attacking on the character or some aspect of the person, and if you are saying that argument or position that person is holding is wrong, then it actually commits a fallacy, and that can be called as argumentum and hominem or against the man. So coming back to the question, identify the fallacy committed in the argument. The policies suggested by him have no merit since he was once charged with embezzlement. So if that's the case, from what we have discussed so far, you now know the answer. That is option A, argument, and hominem, that is abusive, or we are abusing the character or some aspect of the person in order to attack his point. Okay, so that is option A. Moving to the next question. Have you stopped stealing from your parents? Which one of the following fallacies is committed in this argument? So if you consider this particular argument that is given here, it is actually given as a question. Have you stopped stealing from your parents? So in this particular example, there is a problem. If you say yes to this question, that will actually trap you. If you say no to this question, again that will trap you. Have you stopped stealing from your parents means that has an underlying question within it. That means if you say that yes, I have stopped means you have actually steal from your parents in the past. So you are confirming that, right? Have you stopped stealing from your parents? If you say yes, that means you have done in the past and now you have stopped that. Another thing, if you have say or if you said no, have you stopped stealing from your parents? You said no as a reply. That means okay, you are still continuing to steal from your parents. Alright, so there is a problem with this question. We are actually posting two questions in one. That is what happens here. I'll just give you some more examples and the details on this particular type of fallacy, so then you can easily understand this entire concept. The fallacy that is committed here is fallacy of complex question. So what do you mean by complex question? Complex question is a fallacy if that occurs when someone poses a question that presupposes an affirmative answer to an unasked question. So basically, we are asking two questions in one. So we are asking one question, but that presupposes an affirmative answer to an unasked question. I'll just show an example. Have you stopped cheating on your taxes? So you're asking that have you stopped cheating on your taxes? In this particular question, or this question only makes sense if we assume another question, that is, have you ever cheated on your taxes? So that means, have you stopped cheating on your taxes? If you say yes, that means you have done this cheating on your taxes in the past. So that is not the question here, that is not mentioned here, but while we are answering, we are actually answering to another question that is within this question that is asked. So when someone asks you, have you stopped cheating on your taxes, they are actually assuming another question, that is, have you ever cheated on your taxes, has already been answered. So the basic thing is they are actually asking two questions in one. That means if you say yes, that will create a problem, and if you say a no, that will again create a problem. So have you stopped cheating on your taxes? If you say yes, that means you have already cheated on your taxes in the past. That is not asked in this question, but if you say or if you reply to that question, it actually proves that okay, this person has cheated on his taxes in the past and now he has stopped it. If you say no, that means still you are cheating on your taxes. So that is what this fallacy of complex question is all about. Coming back to a question, have you stopped stealing from your parents? Which one of the following fallacies is committed in this argument? You can apply the same concept in this example as well, and we can surely say that the right answer for this question is option C, that is complex question. Moving to the next question. Which of the following pertains to fallacy of ambiguity? And you have the options equivocation, the straw man fallacy, hasty generalization, the red herring. So, when we consider fallacy of ambiguity, it is a very general term or a very general topic under which we have to consider various types of fallacies. So, consider fallacy of ambiguity. So, what do you mean by fallacies of ambiguity? Fallacies of ambiguity involve some confusion over meaning, specifically over the members referred to by a term, phrase used in the argument. So, when you consider this particular fallacy, it means that if you are posing an argument in that you have used a term or a phrase in a very confusing manner, so that will actually lead to a confusion and that will finally end up in a fallacy that will be there in the argument as such. So, some confusion over meaning, specifically over the members referred to by a term or phrase used in the argument. So, basically we are posing an argument in which we have used a term or a phrase which is a bit confusing, or it basically if you consider a word like this, WATCH, watch. So, that simple or single word words in itself has two different meanings, right. So, watch means the watch that you wear, this particular watch, right. Another important meaning of that particular word is you are watching something. So, in two different ways we can use the same word. So, if you are using this particular word in an argument and in both the times the context is different, or you have used this particular word in different meanings in the same argument, that can actually create a kind of confusion. So, that kind of fallacies that happens due to this kind of confusions over meaning, specifically or the members referred to by a term or phrase used in the argument, can be called as fallacy of ambiguity. So, under fallacy of ambiguity we have different types of fallacies. Here you have the first one, fallacy of equivocation. So, what do you mean by fallacy of equivocation? Here the confusion happens due to a key term or phrase. The fallacy of equivocation occurs when a key term or phrase in an argument is used in an ambiguous way that creates confusion, with one meaning in one portion of the argument and then another meaning in another portion of the argument. So, fallacy of equivocation happens when you are using a keyword in the same argument with different meanings. You have used that particular word in different places in the same argument, but in both cases you have used in different meanings. So, I will just give you an example, so that would be really helpful for you. A feather is light. What is light cannot be dark. Therefore, a feather cannot be dark. If you consider the term light here, it is actually used in two different meanings in this particular argument, right. A feather is light, that means the feather is light weighted. That is what that particular word means in that sentence. The second premise, what is light cannot be dark. The light used here is different, right. So, the light weighted feather is not what it is mentioned here. Light cannot be dark. So, this is another meaning that we can give to light, right. And we are finally concluding that therefore, a feather cannot be dark. What happened here? In this particular argument, the term light, that is the key term here, okay. So, that particular term light is actually used with different meanings in the same argument in different places. So, that is actually creating a kind of confusion, and that finally results in an error in the entire argument. So, this kind of error or fallacy can be called as fallacy of equivocation. Now, we are moving to the next type that comes under the fallacy of ambiguity, that is fallacy of amphibole. When we have discussed about fallacy of equivocation, we said that the confusion happens due to the meaning of the key term, right. So, there is a confusion in between the meaning of the key term that is used in the argument. That is what leads to fallacy of equivocation. So, what happens in fallacy of amphibole? It is actually occurs due to a syntactic ambiguity. That means there is a confusion in the structure of the sentence. So, the fallacy of amphibole occurs when a syntactic ambiguity allows one meaning to be used in the premise and another meaning to be used in the conclusion. I will just give you an example. Just consider this. If you consider this particular statement that is given here, you will get an idea about what I mean by this idea of syntactic ambiguity. Professor Johnson said that he will give a lecture about heart failure in the biology lecture hall. So, this particular statement or sentence can have two different meanings. Why? Because the sentence structure is actually confusing. So, the first meaning that you can give to this particular statement, or the first meaning that you can actually get from this particular statement is that Professor Johnson said that, or Professor Johnson is actually giving a lecture about heart failure, and this particular lecture happens at biology lecture hall, or in other words the venue where the venue of the program or the venue of the lecture is biology lecture hall. So, Professor Johnson is giving a lecture on heart failure, and this lecture is actually happens at biology lecture hall. That is the first meaning that you can acquire from this particular sentence. The second meaning is that Professor Johnson said that he will give a lecture about heart failure in the biology lecture hall. That means Professor Johnson is actually giving you a lecture on the topic, the heart failure in the biology lecture hall. That means the title or the topic is the heart failure that happened in the biology lecture hall. That is a topic in which Professor Johnson is giving you a lecture. So, this is the two meanings that you can actually get from the same statement or sentence. So, the first one is Professor Johnson is giving you a lecture on the topic heart failure, and this particular lecture is happening at the biology lecture hall. That is the first meaning. The second meaning is that Professor Johnson is actually giving you a lecture on the topic. What is the topic here? The heart failure that happened in the biology lecture hall. So, there are two different meanings, two confusing meanings that we can obtain from this particular same sentence. So, this is what syntactic ambiguity is all about. So, if an argument is having this kind of a syntactic ambiguity which actually leads to a fallacy, that can be called as fallacy of amphibole. Moving to the next type, that is fallacy of composition. So, what do you mean by fallacy of composition? The fallacy of composition arises when a conclusion is drawn about a whole based on the features of its constituent elements. So, we are focusing on the peculiarity of the parts, and we are saying that the entire thing is having that same peculiarity in its wholeness. I'll just give you some examples. I'll just focus on the second example here, so this will be more clear for you to understand. The human body is made up of cells which are invisible, therefore the body is invisible. So, we know that when we consider our body, the constituent element of our body is cells. So, the most important peculiarity of cells is that it is invisible. So, the peculiarity of the part or the constituent element, that is invisible, right? Cells are invisible. We are saying that cells are the constituent elements of body. Cells are invisible, so the entire body is invisible. If you are saying that, that is fallacy of composition. We are actually drawing conclusions about a whole based on the features of its constituent elements. Cells are the constituent elements of our body. Cells having a peculiarity is that it is invisible. So, we are drawing a conclusion like this about the whole. The body is invisible. Cells are the constituent parts of body, that cells are invisible, so the entire body is invisible. So, we are actually committing a fallacy in that. So, that can be called as fallacy of composition. Now, we are moving to the next fallacy, that is fallacy of division. So, what do you mean by fallacy of division? A fallacy of division occurs when one reasons logically that something true for the whole must also be true of all or some of its parts. So, this is just the opposite of what we have discussed in fallacy of composition. Fallacy of division is just the opposite of fallacy of division. When we have considered fallacy of composition, we said that we are drawing conclusions about the whole based on the peculiarities or the characteristics of the constituent elements. That is what happens in fallacy of composition. Here what happens, we are actually saying that we are reasoning out that something is true for the whole must also be true of all or some of its parts. If something is true about the whole, the entire thing, that can be applied to the parts as well. If you are thinking like that, that is fallacy of division. Just consider this example. The car is blue, therefore its engine is blue. So, we are saying that the entire car looks blue. So, engine is actually a part of the car. So, the engine should also be blue. So, if we are saying like that, that is fallacy of division. Alright. So, now we can move to the question that we have discussed. So, the question here is, which of the following pertains to fallacy of ambiguity? And we have the options equivocation, the straw man, hasty generalization, and the red herring. So, the fallacy of ambiguity includes four important types. We have discussed about that, in which we have seen equivocation as a type. So, the right answer for this question is option A, that is equivocation. So, in this video we have discussed about the questions that were asked for the recent exam, December 2020, June 2021 merge cycles from the topic types of informal fallacies. So as I have already mentioned at the beginning of this particular video, this is a very important topic from net point of view, because we are getting a lot of questions from this particular area. So we have just focused on the questions and the right options. For that we have discussed on the explanations on the right answers. You might have seen various options there, various options that I mentioned there. Each of those options are basically different types of informal fallacies. So detailed classes on all these fallacies, all these types of informal fallacies are available in our LMS. So if you want to join Appleby to have a very proper structured kind of a preparation for Indian exam, or if you want to learn more about these types of informal fallacies or any other topics that are associated with NTA UGC Net Paper 1, you can just join with us and you can make your preparations more effective. So our admissions are open now. We have online and offline classes available. If you want to know more about our courses, you can just contact the number that is given in the description box. So I hope this video will be really helpful in your preparations. So thanks for watching and happy learning.